All right, I'll ask everyone to come back to order, please. Members of the jury, because the state has the burden of proof in this case, they have an opportunity to make what is called a rebuttal argument to you. So if you would please give your attention to Ms. Stone.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to work backwards a little bit. I want to start with Mr. Leary's arguments, and then we'll go back to Mr. Kading. So let's start first with Mr. Leary's arguments. How did I get here? How did, as he says, his client is thinking all these things? Well, you don't know that. There was no evidence of that. There was no testimony of that. You have no indication of that whatsoever. There was quite a bit, actually, of Mr. Leary describing to you over and over again what his client is thinking. You, in fact, have nothing about what his client is thinking. So you don't get to take that as evidence in any way. You get to look at his client's actions, her behaviors, and her statements. And you get to evaluate the evidence in this case based on that, not what Mr. Leary asserts to you his client is thinking during the course of this time. He says that this is her last chance to parent. That's what is probably happening on this day because they're getting ready to go to Iraq. I submit to you, this is in fact her last chance to isolate Fatima. You heard from Fatima, this wasn't just like, oh, you know, I'd rather go somewhere else, somewhere different. She had real fears about going back to Iraq. She had real fears about that. It was a one-way ticket. There was no intent or explanation or indication of return at that time. You heard her say, I'd been before and there were some things I liked about it, but mostly I did not feel safe. And I've now been pulled from school. I am no longer around anyone. I've had my cell phone taken away. I can't communicate with anyone. I am at home where my parents can see me all the time. I don't have any adults to talk to. And now I'm going to a country where I don't feel safe. There might be family there, but as Fatima has demonstrated throughout this trial, and this evidence has demonstrated, those are not family members that support Fatima. That's not what she's expecting. And there is no return ticket to come for a 17-year-old who has lived here for a long time. That was very concerning to her based on her own personal experiences, and she expressed that to you. There is Mr. Leary referred to, going back to Wagner, the juror that talked about what his experience was with his runaway child. And let's be very clear, that's not evidence in this case. That's simply Wagner. But notably from that, at no point during his efforts to get his daughter home did you note that he said he strangled his child to do so. The evidence here is what has been presented to you from the witnesses and the testimony. Mrs. because of the evidence, not because of something different, because of the statements of witnesses, because the statements of the people that were present. He says, how could his client know? She just gets there. She has no idea. Yet every single other person that is present says it is obvious, immediately obvious. Not kind of obvious, no, I had to get around to a couple of people to see. It is immediately obvious that this child is unconscious and being choked, but somehow mom is the one person of this whole thing that can't see it. She's the only one. She can only see what is happening to her husband, not anyone else. When we talk about the kids who say they saw it, that's incorrect. Isaiah sees mom strangling with her arms around. She says she can't breathe, and that's part of why he, in fact, reaches down to help her. Athena specifically says mom has her around the neck and is pulling at her around the neck. When you go back and look at those exhibits, you'll see that in one of Noah's still shots, Fatima is sitting there and you can see mom's arms around her neck. Not in the same way dad's are, it's a different hold, but it is around her neck, and Fatima tells you she can't breathe. You will see also that at some point it looks like she's being pulled back and her leg is popping up because mom is in fact pulling on her. Athena said very clearly the mom is grabbing at her to get her, and it is overly aggressive. That was Athena's description of mom grabbing her by the neck. She says Fatima is flailing her arms around, and mom puts her arms around her neck. She says, ultimately, when Mr. Leary was talking about confusing Athena, Miss Zos asked on redirect, "You sound like you were confused," because Mr. Leary, do you recall, he went through second by second on the video with Athena and said, "Well, do you see it here? Well, do you see it here? Well, do you see it here?" And Athena said, I know it was mom, but now that you show me the video, I can't see where mom is on the video, but I know what I saw in person, and I know it was mom. But now I guess I'm confused. And Ms. Zoe came back on redirect and said, "Are you confused because you remember it being mom, but now you can't see the video specifically?" Yes. So in fact, it was Mr. Leary that asked her second by second. But Athena Rich told you, in fact, that it was mom. And she was not confused about that. We heard Fatima say, "I don't think she was trying to hurt me," later at the hospital. But what she immediately says, and you heard Liz Robinson testify, that when she comes in, "My dad was trying to kill me, my dad was trying to kill me, my mom was choking me." That's what Fatima reports to Liz Robinson. That's what Liz Robinson testifies to. And you remember when Fatima testified, she said, I didn't think she was trying to choke me at the time. And I said, "Fatima, do you want to believe your mom is trying to kill you? Do you want to believe your mom is trying to strangle you?" "No, I don't." That is an absolutely reasonable response from a 17-year-old whose dad just strangled her into unconsciousness and a seizure. It is an absolutely reasonable response to want to believe that at least one of your parents is on your side. Absolutely reasonable. Doesn't mean that's what mom was doing. It means that that's what that child is hoping at her core, that there is a parent that is looking out for her. And that is not what happened on this day. Mom has just as long on scene as Josh Wagner. Mom actually has longer on scene as Josh Wagner to see what is happening. And when you look at that video, you see that she does not provide any aid at any time to her child. Zero aid. When she's standing there and counsel talks about her saying, my daughter, that is the explanation for, that's her expressing her concern. But at the time that that is actually happening, remember what is actually going on at that time. That is when Haneen and Isaiah and Zayla are having that confrontation, because Haneen comes in late. Haneen doesn't see anything that's happening. Wagner is already down, holding her dad down when Haneen gets there, and straight in puts the phone in Isaiah's face. And again, why is that? Because in this scenario, for this family, Isaiah is the bad guy. In every version of everything that you have heard, that complaint has been about Isaiah. So when defense counsel says, she doesn't care about Isaiah, she doesn't, whatever, he's whatever, that's not true at all. Every chance that she gets, Zahraa and Haneen provide information to law enforcement about how this is all Isaiah's fault. She says, go, go, go. He said, go, 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 and he took her. You know these people. They're rude. That's what she says. Those are their statements consistently. So this idea that somehow Isaiah doesn't matter, he's of no consequence, so she's not going in there to violate any orders or assault Isaiah or do anything to Isaiah. She absolutely is. She knows she's not supposed to be there. She knows she's not supposed to have contact. She just doesn't care because she does not like Isaiah. And she says that repeatedly. She says it to Officer Hang. She says it to Officer Bell. She says it to Officer Chavez over and over again. And keep in mind, this is the same Isaiah that in September, just 4 weeks prior, she's already had some kind of interaction with at the school that has gotten her trespassed in the first place. So we already know that she is in fact the focus. We know that she is the focus of Zahraa's behaviors and actions and ire. And this is an extension of that. And she thinks that he has Fatima, and she's going to get him back from Isaiah. So during the course of that interaction then, when Haneen comes in and puts the phone in Isaiah's face, and all of a sudden, now, Zahraa is saying, my daughter. Who is she actually saying my daughter about? Is she saying my daughter about Fatima? Or is she saying my daughter about Haneen, who is in the middle of that interaction? We don't know. It could be either one of them. But her follow-on behaviors do not demonstrate this overwhelming concern for the condition of Fatima. It demonstrates a concern for getting her back as if she is a possession, because she wants to isolate her and control her. She doesn't want her talking to law enforcement. She doesn't want her making statements or any more statements about what is going on. When we look at her arrival at the school, how does she know to come running? According to Mr. Leary, she arrives at the school. She hasn't seen any kind of conflict happening. So presumably, Dad has called her and said, hey, I see her. She's here with Isaiah. She's at the bus stop. I'm going to go get her. Presumably, that's what happens, because how else does she even know to come to the school? There's no way for her to know that. And how does she know when the car parks to get out and start running for that scene? Because I submit to you, Dad has indicated to her in whatever way they communicate about discipline of their children that he is grabbing Fatima and it's going to be a fight, and he knows that. And she is running to assist. And when she gets there, that is exactly what she's doing. She doesn't have to know that he has the intent to kill Fatima prior to, but certainly if you run in and somebody is in the middle of strangling somebody, and your first instinct is to remove the people who are trying to help your daughter, that is a substantial step as an accomplice to aid by presence and act. When counsel says, why didn't we call Haneen? Based on what you observed on those videos, do you think there's anything Haneen tells you that is plainly reliable or that doesn't speak to her parents' behalf, regardless of what information she says? Do you think there's anything? She's not there for the striking of her dad, yet she immediately shows up and starts telling law enforcement when they're there, they're hitting my dad, it's all on my video. She doesn't have a video of anyone hitting her dad. She's not even there when that happens. Do you think Haneen becomes a reliable witness to hear anything from? I submit to you that she would not be. When she goes to check on her child at the office, as Mr. Leary said, her first instinct is to go run and check on her child. The amount of time she spends in that school is grossly less than the amount of time she spends trying to get to her husband and screaming. Remember what Officer Bell's and office's cameras look like. Screaming over and over again. You let him go. He did nothing wrong. You let him go. Over and over. Her interaction, look at her demeanor and her body language when she gets in the school. It's angry pointing is what I submit to you. When she leaves that school, it is angry pointing at Mr. Dean. Then she turns around and she's gone. That's it. Remember what Officer Chavez says. I told her EMS was working on her child. What was her response? She didn't have one. No response. So where is this motherly concern that we keep hearing about for Fatima? I submit to you it doesn't exist. It's not there. Fatima told you that she could not breathe. She told Liz Robinson that she could not breathe. And that is consistent with what the other individuals that were present who identified it, because certainly some people said, I didn't see it. Listen, Mr. Denicola said, I saw mom grab, or who I assumed was mom, but then my focus was on dad. That's where I thought the immediate threat was. And Josh Wagner says, I'm staring at dad. This is where my focus is. I know something's over here, but this is my focus. So the people that are actually paying attention at some point, even Isaiah says initially he's not looking at it. And you can see in the video, they're watching dad, because who expects mom to come in as an additional threat? They're not anticipating that until it actually happens. And now they have to intervene. And they immediately, when it happens, start talking about it. Athena says, you can't do that. Like, why are you grabbing her around the throat? You can't do that. Fatima says, I can't breathe. You hear Noah Wagner from across. Let go of her. It's done. At that point, Wagner is already on down. So let go of her is only directed at mom. He's watching it happen in real time. So you absolutely have the individuals that are seeing these things as they are occurring because they are far enough back to identify that. When we talk about crimes and the burglary, as we pointed out, as the state pointed out to you in your instructions, in order for something to be a burglary, you have to enter a building. So yes, a criminal trespass also occurred, but a burglary in the second degree occurred, which enters a building. Just like when she assaults her, that is also an assault in the fourth degree, but it is not only an assault in the fourth degree, and we talked about that. So that argument by defense counsel, well, you could have done this for criminal trespass, we could have also done that. It would have been yet another crime. And instead we didn't. We went with when she entered the building, which she is prohibited from doing. There is no requirement, and you won't find it in your jury instructions, that you have to receive your document in the language of your choosing. That is not how the law works. If you went to, let's say, France, and you got an order or a ticket from France, you wouldn't get to say, I don't know what this says. I get to ignore it. I'm not responsible for it. That's not how the law works. You don't get to create ignorance for your benefit. You are still subject to the laws of the state of Washington.
As to misstating definition of knowingly.
Definition is what?
Knowingly.
Haven't talked about knowingly.
I'm going to have a brief sidebar with the lawyers, and so you can stand and take another little move around break. Please be seated. In just one moment. Okay, we just had a sidebar after Mr. Leary's objection. The objection is really a misstatement of the law. We got to sidebar. Mr. Leary made a very short argument as it related to his objection. Ms. Stone started to respond, and then I just stopped the sidebar and said instead we'd have it on the record. So I am not summarizing verbatim what was argued at sidebar because I'm not going to rely on that. I will just have the argument here in open court. Anything to add to that, Mr. Leary? The sidebar itself.
Instruction 48.
Nope. Anything first to add to the
Oh,
sidebar?
No.
Mr. Keating? Ms. Stone?
No, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. So instruction 48 is the to convict for violation of a court order. Prong 3 says that on or about the said date, the defendant knowingly violated a restraint provision of the order prohibiting contact with a protected party. It's the state's burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt each and every element. And so prong 3 is the burden on the state to establish that the defendant knowingly violated a restraint provision. My argument in my closing was that she was presented an order in a language that there's testimony from her daughter that she does not read. And the state in rebuttal argued that the defense, doesn't get to argue that it was written in the wrong language. The state said there was nothing in the instructions that said that the order had to be written in her language, and used the analogy that if one was to go to France, we wouldn't be able to say that we have ignorance of the law because we don't speak French. The problem here is my client's not claiming innocent or ignorance of the law. The specific issue is the state has to establish a knowing violation of a restraint provision, and if it is contained in a document that there's testimony that she doesn't understand, the state hasn't established that it's a knowing violation. And to assert that somehow it's our job to prove, or it's somehow wrong for the defense to argue that because it was written not in Arabic, that it's an invalid defense. This goes squarely to whether the state has established beyond a reasonable doubt the knowingly violated. And to undercut that diminishes their burden of proof, the presumption of innocence, and shifts the burden to us, and all three are improper.
Thank you. Ms. Stone?
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, first of all, I wasn't done making my argument. I was partway into my argument when counsel raised the issue. So it's unclear to the state how counsel can complain that the state hasn't made an appropriate argument when it hasn't let the state make, in fact, the argument. Second of all, he says very specifically during his closing that one of the ways that he is demonstrating that the state cannot prove that the defendant knew because it wasn't written in their language, as in specifically Arabic, her first choice of language. This is a direct response to that argument made by the defense, which the state is entitled to do. There are, in fact, additional arguments I'm making along with this same line that go to that, but the state has not yet once misstated the obligation of the state as it relates to knowledge. I am talking about a piece of evidence that defense counsel presented, and I am responding to that directly and tying it into knowledge, which still has a significant amount of argument to go from the state. So at this point, not only is his objection not consistent with what the state's arguments have been, it is untimely because the state has not in fact finished that argument, and it is improper because the state is entitled to respond in rebuttal to these specific arguments that defense counsel has made, which is, well, if it's not essentially in her preferred language, then how can the state possibly show that she knew, and so she can't be held accountable for knowing? The state can't prove that because it wasn't in the language that she preferred. Those are all appropriate arguments for the state to respond to, and I was in the process of doing so when defense counsel untimely objected to the course of that argument.
Mr. Leary, anything further?
I would just note that it's not her preferred language, it's that it was written in a language that the testimony is that she doesn't read.
All right, I'm going to overrule the objection. I do not find that the argument that was made by Ms. Stone misstates the law as contained in jury instructions and does not shift the burden of proof to Mrs. Ali in any fashion. And so please bring the jury in. Please be seated. I am overruling the objection. Ms. Stone, you may continue.
So back to what we were talking about, you're not going to find in your jury instructions the requirement that any order be written in any particular language in order to establish knowledge. That is simply not the requirement. The state has to show that the defendant knew it, and you have been given sufficient and ample and overwhelming amount of evidence that she did. Specifically, she was offered the opportunity for an interpreter, and she declined that during the course of the trespass order service. She was then asked for Haneen expressly to be provided so that she could be aware of what the limitations were during the trespass order notice. Again, during the no contact order, as you see, she specifically wants Haneen there, and you see Haneen ask the officer, "Are you okay if I'm here?" She likes to have me present, essentially, words to that effect, so that I can help her with this. And she says, yes. Counsel continued to tell you that the testimony from Fatima was that her mom doesn't read English. That was not Fatima's testimony, I admit to you. Fatima's testimony was she doesn't read it well, and she certainly doesn't read it as well as she speaks it, but Haneen usually helps her, and that is in fact her preferred version of that. You heard the school talk about they've had communications with mom. Those communications are consistently in English, so she absolutely is able to move around her universe in English. The expectation is that you are obligated to follow the laws of the state of Washington, regardless of what your first and preferred language is. I want to be very clear. That does not mean that somehow makes it easier for you. Mr. Leary made a big argument, I'll choose the word argument, at the end, that somehow Mrs. Ali and Mr. Ali are being specifically targeted for some reason other than what their actions are. The laws of the state of Washington apply to them equally. Their actions are what are on trial, not them as humans, not them as people. You don't sit here as judges of character. That's not what your purpose is. You are here to determine if the actions that they took on October 18th, 2024 are consistent or inconsistent with the law, as the court has instructed you. Whether the state has proven that to you beyond a reasonable doubt, not whether you personally agree or disagree with anything about either one of them. That is not the standard, and you absolutely should not be doing that. We don't decide cases based on sympathy or prejudice. You absolutely should not be doing that. We decide cases based on evidence. It's a court of law, not a court of feelings, and so I would ask you to return to your instructions. Somehow, Mrs. Ali speaking a different language, it may impact your decision or your evaluation process in terms of knowledge, but likewise, the additional assistance that she was provided and offered, that she accepts, and the assistance that she declined, demonstrates to you in how she interacted with both law enforcement and the school as to both of those orders, that she understood absolutely what the parameters were for what behaviors she was allowed to do and which ones she was not allowed to do. And she knows she's not supposed to be in that school. Absolutely knows she's not supposed to be there on October 18th. But she goes in anyway because she says Isaiah took her child and go, go, go. When they went in there, run away. So she wants to go get her child back from Isaiah, and she is not allowed to do so when she gets in there by the faculty. She's prohibited from doing so when she gets in there by the faculty. When we talk about the behaviors actually at the scene of mom, again, Mr. Leary is described as like she is comforting her child. That's what she's there for. But you heard Fatima say, that's not what we do. There's no hugging in my family. Like, not just like, hey, it's only occasional here and there. There's no hugging in my family. That is what Fatima said. These are not arms that reach around and comfort her child. This is a different kind of hold. This is a restraint. This is a choking around the neck. And Fatima says immediately, I can't breathe. And Denicola says, I can hear her whispering something, but it's not coming out, right? Remember Athena's testimony also saying, I remember her saying, my husband, as it's happening. That's what I remember. Not my daughter, my daughter. And we know at the time, as we talked about before, Fatima has been isolated significantly at the time that contact is made. So when she runs into the school, again, mom is chasing her down and trying to pull her back. So the 4 weeks of isolation that she has had leading up to this one-way ticket out of the country, mom wants her back. Mom doesn't want her to talk to law enforcement, I submit to you, doesn't want her to talk to the school officials anymore. And that is what she is concerned about. Remember, she says, just let me talk to her. I just want to talk to her for 1 minute. That's what she's telling Officer Chavez. Not how is she, what is she doing? Just let me talk to her for 1 minute. Does that sound like a mom that wants to know about the condition of her child? Or does that sound like a mom who wants to make sure that she and her child are on the same page and they are able to get their story straight? So then let's go to Mr. Kading's arguments. Mr. Kading over and over again says, when my client was unconscious, my client had this head trauma, when my client had all of these things wrong with him. You heard no evidence of that. In fact, you heard Isaiah say, I thought he went unconscious, and when asked, is that something you did or is that something that happens later? He says, well, when we were striking him, nothing happened. Eventually, his eyes closed. And when is that? Well, Mr. Wagner was the one and he doesn't know his name, Mr. Wagner. He says, not the adult, not the bus guy, the other guy. When that guy gets there, everything stops. And Josh Wagner says, when he gets there, his eyes are open. He is choking that child. He is strangling that child. And when Josh Wagner does whatever special operations maneuver Josh Wagner does, that is when he releases. And everyone agrees with that. Denicola says, I'm trying to get his hands apart, not successful. I'm doing it on my own. And then another guy shows up at the same time. They all talk about the third individual that is present but has really no interaction. And you see that guy in the blue coat come running from the elementary school across the street. But about the time that Wagner is on top of Mr. Ali, that is the same time that Denicola is down there pulling at the hands. And I submit to you, those things happen at approximately the same time. But each of those kids, his eyes are wide open. Remember what Denicola says, the look on his face. This is not an individual who is unconscious and strangling. It's not an individual where there's any indication of head trauma. And Mr. Kading said, well, they didn't even check. Right, because he said he didn't need any. How in the world, why would they check for a head trauma when they've identified, would you like any medical? Do you need any medical? No. Because there's nothing wrong with Mr. Ali. There's no cerebral anything. There's no loss of consciousness. And remember what Dr. Gilbert says, when you lose consciousness, you lose control of your body. And you see exactly what happens when you lose consciousness. When you watch the video of Fatima, you go limp. Everything relaxes. You go limp. You heard Lisa Wall talk about that. When you lose consciousness, you relax, which is what makes strangulation even more dangerous when you lose consciousness, because all of your muscles relax. And your muscles they don't hold on and pull even tighter. The scenario that Mr. Kading offered you over and over again is not reflected in the evidence in any way. Everyone that described how Mr. Ali was holding his daughter describes it in, right to left, describes it in a headlock, a rear naked choke, armbar, and it's pinched back. Every single person did this. If he is unconscious, it all drops. It all lets go. And you didn't see that once. And when you listen to them talk about it, There's not a single person that says it looked like it was involuntary, that it was not intentional, that it was anything other than exactly what it was. He was angry, and the look on his face says so. He is intending to do those behaviors. Intent is reflected, I submit to you, by action. A lot of people can say a lot of things, but what we should be evaluating people by are the actions that they take. And the actions, the force used by Mr. Ali was with the intent to murder his daughter. That action is taken, that intent can be formed at any point during the course of that. He does not simply walk over as his daughter is trying to run away from him and grab her by the wrists to take her home. That's not what he does. You see him in that video, and I'm not sure if Sir Kading played it multiple times, and we must be watching a very different video, because when he says, look, he's just grabbing her, right, around the neck. She's bent down, and he immediately goes around her neck and immediately grabs her and maintains that hold on her throughout. So that is absolutely what he's doing. He is strangling her from the get-go. Isaiah and Caleb, those kids are watching, and they immediately know what's going on, and they immediately know that this is wrong. You actually see at one point Fatima, as they're starting to go back, her hands are here, and she's already at the neck. Her hands are already up, because that's where his arms are. The kids see that too. So no, they're not attacking. This is not some mob that is beating up, where Mr. Ali somehow is the victim in this case. Mr. Ali instigated this. He initiated these whole series of events, and he strangled his child in front of a large group of other children who know exactly what they saw when they saw it, and as kids knew that Fatima was in danger and had to intervene. That's what they were doing. They're not the initial aggressors. Mr. Ali is. He's not defending himself against Isaiah. He immediately grabs, as all of those kids described, Fatima aggressively, and Isaiah knows, because he has the historical background on this family. He's not simply taking Fatima's words for what has been going on. And he told you that. I know what happens. I've seen my own information to corroborate what Fatima has told me. He's also had his own experience with mom to corroborate what Fatima has told him. He knows that the school has taken these efforts. If you're a kid and the school has taken these efforts, might that also indicate to you that those safety concerns have been corroborated? So no, it's not just Fatima making statements and everybody just taking her word for it. Those statements have real value. And the people that are involved or subject to them, I submit to you, know when danger is most likely to them based on their relationships with the people that they are involved with. The school doesn't call her parents, and the school doesn't call her parents because they have a safety concern. So in what world would you, as an official who has a history of interacting with a child, call the person to let them know that you found their child so that they can come home and take them when you have a safety concern? Ms. Robinson said it wasn't imminent, and then she described imminent means like he's not strangling her right in front of me. I don't need to call 911 at the moment because he's not right here, but we can make another set of arrangements for her. Absolutely appropriate. When they talked about, when Mr. Kading talked about, well, Isaiah hit him because he was mad. Isaiah said, I mean, I was mad, yeah, after I got punched, as I think is a reasonable, I submit to you, is a reasonable response. He doesn't say, I went and attacked him because I was mad. The question was, well, when Mr. Ali punched you, you were mad, weren't you? And he was like, yeah. That is an absolutely reasonable response for a kid to say, this adult punched me in the side of the head, He was trying to attack his daughter. I was trying to intervene to keep her safe, which Isaiah is also entitled to do. And the defendant punched me in the side of the head. So yeah, I was kind of mad about it. Fair. But then when he stumbles back, and you see how far in the video from the front of the bus, how far he stumbles as a result of that, he stands back up, he looks around, and Dad is already taking Fatima into a headlock and a chokehold. So when they go, they're not going over the push him down and start kicking him. They're trying to get Fatima out. And to be fair, they're kids. So if we're arguing that the execution of said non-existent plan by kids wasn't the greatest execution, that's probably a fair statement. But it doesn't mean the intent is any different, right? It's very clear that they're all screaming, they're all kicking, and despite all of that, Dad doesn't release. Even when Mr. Denicola is there yelling about it, even when Mr. Wagner shows up. That is not, those injuries to Fatima are not because they're just wrestling on the ground and he's trying to protect her. Nothing about what he is doing is trying to protect her, and you have that testimony. And you have the description of the injuries. That armbar hold that was described to you, that is very specific. That's not simply hands. It's not like, oh, we all got caught up and we were all tangled. It was this, and he was locked in. Mr. Denicola described it as his hands were tied together and he could not even pry his fingers apart. He was actively resisting having his fingers pried apart. Defense counsel argued that all of these kids had all watched the video. All these people had come in and they'd spent all this time testifying about the video, and so therefore that's why all of their testimony was the same. Ladies and gentlemen, that is akin to interviewing people that have left the Grand Canyon and taking issue with the fact that they all called it real big. They all described what they saw. They described her going pale. They described her lips going blue. They described her, well, two of them saw her seizing, what Dr. Gilbert would describe as seizing. They don't know that that's what they're seeing, but that's what they've described. They've described her being unconscious. All of those things are described to you because that's what they observed, and from their vantage points. And some of them didn't describe things that other people identified. And to that end, Mr. Denicola and Mr. Wagner and Mary Wagner also didn't describe all of the same things. But the things they did describe that were the same, that overlap, is because that's what happened, and that is consistent with the video. So statements to the contrary don't make any sense, right? We've described, you heard Fatima say she thinks as she's coming into this conversation, it's calm, but all of the other students are watching and they're like, it looked really angry and aggressive to me. So what does that tell you about the environment that Fatima is in? That what feels like a calm conversation to her with her dad is described otherwise by the objective observers watching, that is not calm. You have evidence of the intent for days. And Mr. Kading said, there's no evidence of any intent here. You do. And the actions are, in fact, the evidence of your intent. When you look at that assault 1, for example, it says that whether the defendant acted with the intent. And if you walked up and somebody was strangling someone into unconsciousness in that same type of hold, and they said, don't worry, it's fine, I'm not trying to kill him. Don't worry, it's fine, I'm not trying to hurt him, they're fine. And you've watched their lips go blue, and you've watched their eyes roll back in their head, and you've watched them seize. Would those words mean anything to you? I'd submit that they would not. You would not believe that because of what you are observing with your eyes about the acts themselves. They speak louder than any words that Mr. Ali could have provided at the time. Don't get caught, please, into the idea for great bodily harm under assault in the first degree. The great bodily harm has to be inflicted. That is not the instruction to you. The instruction to you is that the force used must be likely to cause great bodily harm or death. That the force used. And you have an overwhelming amount of evidence of that specifically. Mr. Ali knows exactly who these individuals are. He's spoken with Mr. Barnes. They've spoken about Fatima and Isaiah specifically. He knows that his wife is subject to, I submit to you, a no contact order with Isaiah.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
He knows who these individuals are.
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
He knows who these individuals are. He's spoken with Mr. Barnes. He knows that Fatima is in a relationship. In fact, he's told, and Mr. Barnes testified about that. He said, I'll do my best. We can try and keep these kids apart. That's what Mr. Barnes told you. But what are we gonna do? Like, they're in love, but I want to be respectful, and I want your wife to stay away from my son. That was his testimony on the stand. And then as they're standing there, Isaiah is rubbing her back and essentially saying, it's okay, right? And you heard Noah's testimony. Noah says, I said, inshallah, it's love. What are you going to do? They're in love. And that he did not like that. Mr. Ali did not like that. He knows exactly. There's no indication here that Mr. Ali is dense and he doesn't recognize contextual clues, especially when there's been a direct conversation about it. That information is all information that Mr. Ali has. So if anyone also is directly under the point of Mr. Ali's ire, again, that would be Isaiah. So do you think that punch then is delivered with a bit more force because of who it is being delivered to versus a push? Maybe the reasonable alternative is a push to that. But he doesn't do that. He punches him in the head. And again, why? Because he's mad. The standard for reasonable doubt is not a doubt. It's not a single doubt. That's not the standard. That is a misstatement, in fact, of that law. Go back to your instructions. The standard is whether it is a reasonable doubt, not any possibility, not any doubt. And in fact, if you have an abiding belief in the truth of the charges, then you don't have a reasonable doubt. When you came into this case, you didn't know anything about the facts whatsoever. You knew nothing. So if you're coming to that place now where you're like, I believe that I have an abiding belief in the truth of the charges, that the state has proven that to me beyond a reasonable doubt, then I submit to you I have met my burden. Certainly do not lower the burden of the state, but also don't make it greater than what it actually is. And that is the instruction before you. Not any doubt, not a single doubt, but a reasonable doubt. Counsel used the exception, or excuse me, the example of making a basketball hoop. So he must have intended it, that you can only intend a strangulation by putting your hands. Anything else, bless you, anything else is not evidence of intention. I submit to you it is a strange or maybe even an absurd scenario where somebody whoops-a-daisies their way into an armbar hold, a rear naked choke. That's not an accidental event. That is a exceptionally intentional event. You can be, let me back up. Defense counsel said, you know, these are parents that they're at the end with Fatima. They're struggled, they've had a hard time. As I said during my first closing, everyone can relate to that, right? Parenting is hard, and that people derive sympathy from that, and we certainly, individuals can understand that. But it does not matter for the purpose of this trial as it relates to actions that those defendants took. You can be the worst kid in the absolute world, and it still wouldn't justify what these two parents did to Fatima on that day. You do not get to strangle your child. You just don't. So that is, parental discipline does not allow for that. Parents have a lot of leeway. And that's, I would argue that's probably true across the country, but in the state of Washington, parents have a lot of leeway in how they restrain and discipline their child. But those rights are not unabridged. You don't get to do whatever you want and then couch it under the guise of parental discipline. And here, Mr. and Mrs. Ali grossly exceeded what that looks like. Fatima was strangled for approximately 45 seconds. And if you think about how long 45 seconds is for somebody who hasn't taken a breath, they weren't anticipating holding their breath, they weren't anticipating being strangled, and it's not just holding their breath, but there's additional pressure and panic occurring at the time. 45 seconds is a really long time. So let's count it out. That's 45 seconds. That's how long her dad was strangling her. It's a really long time, you guys. School is supposed to be a safe place for kids. It's a safe place for Fatima. She told you that when she testified. She's known adults and other students there for 2 years. She's formed relationships with those adults. The school told you they had concerns about Fatima being online and not having access to other adults. These are the same adults Tracy Arnold testified that told you they would feed her, they would give her snacks. When Fatima shows up at school that morning, she leaves the house at 4 or 5 a.m. and she just simply waits, does circles until school opens up. She testified about that. And as soon as school opens up, she goes in. That's where she goes. She doesn't go somewhere else. She doesn't get on a bus to Disneyland. She doesn't do something else. She goes to the school. And defense counsel says she ran straight to Isaiah. She ran straight to Mr. Thomas. That was her first period teacher, also Isaiah. That's where her safe people were in that class. She goes to her first period class, to her safe people, her safe adults. And she talks to Mr. Thomas first. Remember, Mr. Thomas calls Isaiah out of class. Mr. Thomas goes and gets her snacks, brings them out to her, and then sends her to go see the counselors. And that's where she spends the rest of that day. She knows these adults, she trusts these adults, and her parents know that about her. We tell our kids to tell someone when they don't feel safe. We tell them to find a safe adult. Tell your teacher, tell your counselor, tell someone outside of your home. And that is exactly what Fatima did on October 18th of 2024. She has been characterized throughout this trial as just an angsty, bratty teenager who just didn't want to go on a family trip. That could not be farther from the truth. She did not just want to hang out with her boyfriend. She showed up, she flees her house, she hides, she goes directly to the school, she tells the school that she needs help. What evidence is there that the things she testified about on that day were a lie? What about that video that you watched, we've now all watched repeatedly, was a lie? Was there anything about that video that she said didn't happen that was a lie that you saw? I submit to you that there was not. Fatima said she was not safe. That's what she said. I didn't feel safe. I don't feel safe. I told the school I didn't feel safe. Isaiah knew I didn't feel safe. 6.5 hours later, her parents showed up and proved she was correct. So where is the lie in that? She was most certainly not safe. I'd ask you to return verdicts of guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the jury, in just a moment, the bailiffs are going to come forward and lead you back to the jury room. When you return to the jury room, the two alternate jurors who are remaining will take their belongings and they will be leaving. But I will tell both of the alternate jurors I have not and do not release you from the instructions that I have given you. You are still prohibited from discussing this case from anyone seeking out information, be exposed to information, and the like. Once the trial is concluded, the bailiff will reach out to you and let you know that the case is concluded, and at that time, you will be released from my instructions. If something happens during the jury deliberation process and one of the 12 is unable to continue, number 2 would be called back, join the group, and deliberations start all over again. And same would be if we had 2 people, then alternate number 3 could still be called back, and that's why you are not released from your instructions in any way. And I want to truly, if I don't see you again, thank you so much for your service. For the 12 of you who are going to be going back to the jury room, it is 4:10. What you need to do today is you need to select the presiding juror, and then you need to decide what time you're coming back tomorrow morning, either at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, to begin your deliberations. I'd be sending you home at 4:30, so I don't want you to start your deliberations. Select your presiding juror and select the time that you are coming back tomorrow. All of your instructions remain. You are not to seek out information. You are not to talk about this case with anyone. The only time you can deliberate is when all 12 of you are in the room together for deliberations. So you can't call each other in the middle of the night because it's deliberation time. It's very, very important. So please continue, of course, to follow my instructions. Thank you very much for your time and attention this morning. The bailiffs will lead you back. Please be seated. If you have not done so already, if you will provide your contact information to the clerk, please, in case we have a question, or ultimately if we have a verdict. Mr. Kading and Mr. Leary, I ask that you stay within about 10 or 15 minutes from the courthouse so that you can return as soon as possible if we have a question. I will say that we should not have a lot of questions because I think the lawyers did a nice job during closing of telling the jurors a lot of what our common questions are. But we could have questions, so I would like people to be readily available. The jury is going to select their presiding juror and then select when they are going to return tomorrow. And as I told them, they can determine that they will start at 8:30 or 9 o'clock tomorrow. And then we will wait to hear from them. Ms. Stone, do you have any questions?
I do not, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Kading?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Mr. Leary?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, so we will be in recess until such time as either we have a question from the jury or if they indicate that they have reached a verdict. Thank you.
All rise. Court's in recess.